We have, a person is conscious, a person has consciousness, okay? But there's also a sense of your moral perspective, okay? And your moral perspective is your, let's see, is it pronounced conscience? Conscience. That's called conscience as opposed to conscious. So I understand in Spanish the words are the same, so there's a difficulty there between those, okay? So your conscience is your moral perspective. That's your conscience. You do something bad, then you don't feel so good about it. You say, oh, I shouldn't have done that. That's your conscience. But your consciousness, you see, is this thing that I've been talking about, your consciousness. That's who you are. That's the player with that's the player of the video game with the mouse and the screen. That's your consciousness. But that consciousness also has a conscience, which means a moral perspective. And that's a problem in the English to Spanish, because evidently Spanish has the same word for both. But one's a moral perspective, but the other is the thing that has the moral perspective. Okay, I'm talking about the thing that has the moral perspective, which is the consciousness. And when we talk about being conscious, then that's just a different part of the same word, consciousness. Being conscious is a consciousness is conscious. Am I making sense, or are we just getting confused in the language as opposed to having a moral perspective? A conscience. Comprende? Okay, so that was just a little confusion going on there. So let's read these, been asked to read these definitions again. And of course, all this will be one day, hopefully not that long, hopefully just a couple of months, this will all be on YouTube. So you'll be able to come back to this and listen to it again and again if you want. If there are parts that, I've given you so much material that it's very hard for you to grasp and process all of it in real time as we go. It's a very difficult thing to do. So there will be a video and you can go back over this again, because after you've had a couple of months to think about it, and then if you heard it again, it would be entirely different. So let's go back over those before we start the new material. The first definition I had was awareness, and I defined awareness as being conscious, which means being aware, which is different than having a moral perspective. Okay, it's being aware. If you're aware, then you're conscious. Okay, awareness is the knowledge of both self and other than self. So you're aware that you exist, and you're aware that there's an outside world that also exists. That's awareness. If you had no awareness, there would be not even you. You wouldn't exist, nor would the outside world exist, you see. No awareness means nothing. So awareness is that awareness that you exist, awareness that the outside world exists. Awareness is a sense of, an appreciation and understanding of one's own existence and what exists beyond oneself. Awareness is capable of experience and learning from that experience. It is both necessary and good. That's awareness. Now, will is awareness focused toward the achievement of a goal. So you have an awareness and you have a goal. That's the will of that awareness. It's focused upon the achievement of a goal. It's your will to accomplish something. Intent. Intent is the expression of active will within consciousness. So you see, we're building on these words. We're defining words and then using them. So intent is the expression of active will. Will was the awareness focused toward the achievement of a goal. So intent is that active will of consciousness. So you have consciousness, it has an intent. That's its active will. Now the next one is love. And we can talk a little bit about love. I suppose we might as well do that. Love is about other. Okay. Love is other-focused. It is creatively expressed as compassion toward and caring about other. It expresses itself in terms of service and value to others. Love is awareness expressing an intention to be helpful and useful to others. To be more precise, compassion and caring, service and value, being helpful and useful to others are the results of awareness acting on a love-based intent. Okay? So if you have a love-based intent, then your natural expression of that love-based intent is compassion and caring, service and value, being helpful and useful to others. All right. Maybe we'll just take a little pause here and talk a little bit about love while we have the opportunity, and we're mentioning it. We'll expand that a little bit. You've probably all heard the term or the phrase that you can't love somebody else until you've learned to love yourself. Okay? And now that will be very confusing because I'm saying love is not about yourself. If it's about yourself, it's ego. Well, what's the difference here? Why the discrepancy? Well, it's just a matter of how you use words. I find it to be not very, not very good choice of words to say that to use love in respect to yourself, that you should love yourself, because the immediate question says, well, you should love yourself, but I don't mean narcissism. I don't mean egotism. I don't mean love yourself, oh, I'm so great, I'm wonderful, I'm better than everybody else. We don't mean that by love yourself, you see. So when you use that term, you should love yourself, now you have to explain that you don't really mean love yourself. That's not what I mean at all. I know that's what I said, but that's not what I mean. And it's a confusing thing. What a person means when they say you have to love yourself, they mean that you have to not dislike yourself. You have to not have negativity about yourself, okay? Because that negativity, that guilt, that feeling of worthlessness, all that is ego, and that's negative, and that pulls you down. And if you have that kind of negative attitude towards yourself, it's very difficult to have positive attitudes toward anything else. If you feel that bad about yourself, that badness reflects in everything you do. So that's really what they're trying to say. They're not trying to say be narcissistic, have a big ego. They're saying don't be so hard on yourself. Let all that negative stuff that you feel, all that insecurity, that's the problem. You need to let go of that first. So there's really no disagreement. It's just a matter of how you use words. And I find it difficult to use words that say something that you don't really mean, which is you need to love yourself, but no, you don't really need to be narcissistic, you see. So that's why I don't use that. So anyway, that's one little point that might bring out. You need to be authentic. You need to accept yourself. You need to start from who you are. Before you can learn anything, I shouldn't say that, but before, your place to start with your learning is to accept yourself. That has to be your starting place. Because if you don't start with an authentic self, then how can you change yourself? You don't even know who you are. You're not even, you're not starting from where you are. You have to say, here's where I am. Whether that's pretty or whether that's ugly, here's who I am. And from there, once you accept that, as just the way it is, now you can go on to change it. But if you won't accept who you are, if it's, well, I'm not really like that, you know, and you have denial or you suppress, then how can you change who you really are? Because you're not even starting from an authentic self. You see, so that idea that you have to start from a place of accepting yourself. Here I am, and I'm going to improve. Let's go. That is the way you have to approach it. Now, let's see. Another thing about love, while we're on the subject, and I'll continue with the definitions, is love is given unconditionally. Love is something you give. If it's not unconditional, it's not love. Okay. Most of us, you know, we use the word love in all sorts of ways. You know, we make love, and often that doesn't have anything to do with love. You know, we talk about we love people, and sometimes that really doesn't either. Our relationships often have a large component of need in them, and we confuse love and need. We have need, and many relationships are need-based. You and whoever you're having a relationship with, it's because you need each other. You have certain needs, and that person fulfills your needs, and they have needs, and you fulfill their needs, and that's called love. But see, that's conditional. I'll fulfill your needs if you fulfill my needs, is the condition. And if both agree on that, well, that's a business arrangement. That's a deal. You know, that's you know, you've come to some kind of an agreement of how you'll meet each other's needs. That has nothing to do with love. Love isn't coming to you know, an agreement with conditions about how you have to meet each other's conditions. That's a different thing. Now, our relationships with people, when I say with people, I just don't mean, you know, your significant other, but relationships with your boss, relationships with your children, relationships in general, you see, need to be love-based and not need-based. But particularly if it's your significant other, you probably have a component of it that's love-based. You've given, you know, love, you love that person. And there's a component of it probably that's need-based. There's things you need from that person, and if you don't get them from that person, you have a problem. You don't feel right. The relationship's not being what you want it to be. It's not meeting your needs. See, so that's something to think about. If it's not unconditional, it's not love. There's a difference between love and striking a deal to meet someone's needs and they meet your needs. So we would like to grow our relationships, to have less of that deal that we make, less of that conditional in it, and more of the love in it. Love is something you give away. Love is forever. You don't give it and take it away. You don't earn somebody else's love. They have to just want to give it to you. You see, it's a gift. You do earn like. You do earn trust. If a person likes you, you have to earn that like. If a person trusts you, you have to earn that trust. If a person loves you, there's nothing you can do to earn it. They just have to give it to you. You see? You know, we can love people and not like them. We can love people and not trust them. You see, these are different things. So love is when we talk about love here, we're talking about, it has to be about other. If it's about yourself, it's something else. Probably ego, probably fear-based, but not necessarily. All right, let's go on to the next definition, and that is fear. Fear now is the opposite of love. And if you contrast this definition with the one I just read about love, you'll see that they just are the opposite of each other. Fear is about self. Fear is creatively expressed as ego, belief, expectation, wants, needs. It expresses itself in terms of value to self. I need, I want, I believe, I expect, I deserve. Okay, that's fear-based. To be more precise, ego and belief, self-centeredness and expectation are the results of awareness acting on a fear-based intent. Fear is the fundamental nature of a high-entropy consciousness. Now, if you have a very good memory and you contrast that with the one we said about love, you'll see that they're in the same structure of both of those sentences. It's just they're opposites of each other. Okay, now ego. Ego is not simply just self-awareness. Remember, the first definition was about awareness. And you can be aware of self. Remember, awareness is awareness of self and awareness of not self, of everything else. But ego is not simply self-awareness. As we said above in that definition of the consciousness, a sense of self, a sense of one's own existence, is both necessary and good. And a sense of other is necessary and good. Otherwise, there could be no collective experience or learning. If you didn't have any sense of your own existence, how are you going to cumulatively learn through experience? It wouldn't even exist, you see. It wouldn't be in your awareness. While love expresses awareness in the service of others, ego expresses awareness in reaction to fear. Okay? Ego expresses awareness in reaction to fear. Thus, ego is the result of awareness acting on fear-based intent. So you see, ego is a child of fear. It's generated by fear. So now you have this self-awareness, and this self-awareness can act with a love-based intent, okay, and that's where we get our compassion, our caring, you know, that sort of thing, our cooperation. Or this awareness can act on a fear-based intent. And if it acts on a fear-based intent, that's what I'm calling ego. Now, in some people's minds, they call ego just all self-awareness, you see, is ego. And the reason we got to that idea that all self-awareness is ego is because the word was defined in terms of average individuals. Let me say this another way. Freud coined that word ego, okay? Now, when he was making his model, when Freud was developing his model, he looked at a lot of people. You know, he was an experimentalist too. He looked at a lot of people, and he saw that all of these normal, seemingly happy and healthy people that he thought seemed to be doing all right out in the world, seemed to be okay. They all had this strong sense of self. They all had this awareness of how they fit in and connected and what they needed and how to go get and meet their needs or how to deal without. And they had this self-centeredness, and that was normal. Therefore, that was good. And it was just that became their self-awareness. And the reason that was actually a good model is because most of us, about 90–95% of our self-awareness is in reaction to fear. Because again, this is an elementary school. You know, this is daycare. We tend to be, to the large part, motivated and our intents tend to be fear-based. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So having a fear-based intent became normal, thus good. So a psychologist may tell you that you have to have a certain amount of this, don't tread on me, take care of self, you know, I need to look out for myself, otherwise people will push me around, they will take advantage of me. You need to be aware of what's good for you and take care of number one, otherwise number one will not get taken care of. So that is a fear-based intent. And in our culture, that's normal and that's good. You have to have that. In a bigger picture, it's a fear-based intent. It's not good, and it's one of the things that keeps you from becoming, you know, more evolved. It keeps you unhappy. It keeps you in a struggle because you're defining yourself in terms of fear. I got to protect myself. I got to make sure I get mine. You see, you start to define your world in terms of your fear that way, and that's going down the wrong path. Well, then people, when I explain that, many people then have the idea, yeah, but if I'm not like that, if I don't take care of number one, everybody will push me around. What am I going to do? You know, nobody's going to take care of me like me. Well, that's not true. When you are love-based and not fear-based, you become more powerful. People like you more. People want to take care of you more. People appreciate you more. You become more powerful, more influential. Because instead of people looking out for number one and each one trying to protect themselves against the other, see, that's the fear-based thing, you have people cooperating. People see you as somebody to look up to. You actually have more power. Look at in our history. Look at the people who have done amazing things, like turned entire cultures around and changed the way millions of people think about things, and say, who do you know that's done things like that? Well, we'd look at Gandhi, wouldn't we? Okay, he basically sent the English packing out of India, and he did it not with force. He didn't chase them out. He didn't fight them and push them away. He did it by using love, by caring. Martin Luther King did the same thing when it came to race relations in the United States. He changed a whole culture in his lifetime. Changing a culture that much usually takes 3 or 4 generations. He accomplished that in 10 years. Why? Because he was open. He wasn't saying, we need to force them to give us our rights and struggle, fight. He used love. He cared. He said, we're all just people. We need to get along. We need to not have these racial ideas. They're wrong. They're dysfunctional. And he demonstrated how true that was. Peacefully. So you see, these are people who didn't worry about, oh, I need to take care of me. These are people who just gave, and they were open. They had tremendous power, tremendous influence. And you will find that same thing happens on an individual scale. You don't have to be, the leader of your country or something. You don't have to be like that. In your own life, as you become more love-based and less fear-based, you will find that you have more control. You don't need control. I say that as a metaphor. You have more control. You don't need any control. Things just happen. People respect you. You don't have to be that frightened animal in a corner trying to, defend yourself. So, we've gotten fear, we've gotten ego. Belief. Belief occurs when you really want to know, but do not have the facts. You simply believe you know, and now you feel better. You see, I really need to know this. This is important to me. This is a big thing. It's important to my being. I want to know this, but I really don't have the facts to do it. So I feel uncertain. And what is that uncertainty? And I don't like that uncertainty. That's fear. It's fear of the unknown. Fear of not being right. fear of being on the wrong side of the issue, fear of believing the wrong thing or not believing the right thing. It's fear-based. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to believe that. All right, now I've done. I've made my decision. There I am. I can forget about the angst and the uncertainty. I'm certain now because I believe. So you see how that helps? Belief is a strategy for dealing with fear in the most part. So that's not really a good thing. If you want to know or fear not knowing, or if you're just unable or unwilling to discover the facts, sometimes people believe just out of laziness. They don't want to research. They don't want to find out the facts. It's more convenient. It suits them better. It feels better if they just believe. You know, people in politics are like that, right? They'll choose sides and whatever, and they don't know what the facts are, but they're just doing that because that's what feels good, because that's what their parents did, or that's what their friends do, or whatever. You know, it just feels right and they do it. They could find out what the facts are. The facts are maybe around, but too lazy to really do that. It's easier just to believe. Okay, they use that belief to fix a fear problem. But at the same time, it fixes that fear. It seems to fix that fear problem. It doesn't really. It just glosses over it. It greatly reduces the probability that you'll ever actually find out the facts that you don't know. Because as soon as you get to the point that you say, I believe, then you no longer are open, looking for things that contradict that belief. You see things that contradict that belief, you ignore them. You toss them out. You refuse to look at them. So that's what I call a belief trap. If you get stuck in a belief trap, all you've done is cut yourself off from the information that you might need to go beyond. Okay, and we're going to talk about it.
So, I think we're now going back through those definitions, and that was kind of fun, learning about a little more about love and so on. Now, I'm going to answer a couple of fundamental questions that I expect you're all much too polite to ask, but I don't know if I told you in the beginning. Please don't not ask a question because you think it might not be polite. If it's a serious question, and you really need to know, ask it. See, politeness is not required.
Genuineness and real interest is. So here's some questions you probably would like to ask, but probably won't. But no, please ask any question you want. There are no questions that are off the table. You can ask anything, and they can be hard questions. You know, that's all right. As long as it's an honest question, it's a good question. Well, here's one that I think you might want to ask. What makes you think that this model is correct? How correct is it? And where is it going? Where are these ideas going? What is it leading to? You know, what's important about it in the big picture? And the second question we'll get to then after that is, why should I care? You know, what does this really mean to me as an individual? Why is it important? Why should you make an effort to understand and make an effort to deal with this information rather than just let it breeze through your intellect and then forget about it? Okay, so those are two questions we're going to think about. Well, to answer the one of what makes me think this model is a good model, and I would say is a good model rather than correct, and that is that the same criteria that describes any good model, how does any scientific model, and this is a scientific model, how does any scientific model become a good model or a poor model? How do we make that judgment? The judgment on the value of a model is how well does it answer the mail? How well does it answer the facts that we know? Now, when I say the facts, I mean the experimental facts, the things that we have measured, the things that we know are like this, not opinions, but the facts. Does your model actually agree with the facts? That's number one. Number two is, can this model predict new facts, and then have experiment confirm them. Okay. And the third is, how useful is it? Does this model do anything that's significant? Does it give us new information, new ways of looking at things? Is there an advantage over the old model? Okay, those are the ways that those are the three conditions that make any model a good model or a bad model. That's how science decides what a model is. Okay. You don't decide how good a model is based on how well it agrees with your beliefs. That's not a good way to decide whether a model is good or not. Let's see. This model fits the known data very, very well. So far, there isn't any of the physics or fundamental metaphysics or even fundamental theology that it doesn't match precisely, match very well. And it predicts new knowledge. There's lots of experiments now in science that have no answers. For instance, there is, if you Google PEAR Labs, PEAR being an acronym, P-E-A-R, Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research, PEAR. It's a group of scientists that came out of Princeton University, where Albert Einstein did his work. And they have, for the last 30 years, been examining what's called anomalous effects, which means effects that really shouldn't happen, effects we just have no idea why it works that way. And mainly what they've been looking at is how mind affects matter. And they have done these experiments over and over with immaculate scientific protocols. And their statistics, of course, they keep very tight statistical control of their experiments and their environments. Their statistics of merit, you know, statistics will tell you whether something is likely to be just chance or not. And that's how almost all of the science is done. That science is done with statistics. Is you do the statistics and it says how likely is it that your result was just chance. In other words, that your result didn't actually mean anything. You just got it and it was a lucky guess or something. Well, from PEAR Labs, if you Google PEAR and go to their site, you will find a little video that'll explain what they've done and how they've done it. And you will find out that their statistics of significance, is what it's called, are 1 billion to 1. 1 billion to 1 that what they have done in their experiments was just chance. Well, I tell you, in most science, if you get 1,000 to 1, it's considered a fact. 100 to 1 is good. You know, 10,000 to 1, nobody will ever argue with it. They're at 1 billion of 1. So it's in, you know, this is evidence that can't be really argued with. And mind does affect matter, but they have absolutely no theory or idea why it works, why they can do these experiments. This, of course, explains those experiments and how they work. And that's just one example. There's dozens, there's 20 or 30 I could list of these kinds of experiments that have scientific information and no explanation whatsoever. And this provides the explanation, a tight, logical, scientific explanation of how these things work. So that's why I think the theory is a good theory, a good model. Now, do I think it's perfect? Is this absolutely correct? No, of course not. Any theory, if it's not very simple, is a living thing. It grows. As you have more experience, as more information comes in, it changes, it evolves. What I'm talking about today and some of the scientific things I'm telling you today, I had no idea when I first published the books. See, it keeps growing, it keeps becoming, and I keep looking for things that are outside of it. I don't believe in this model. If I believed in it, I'd no longer be looking for things that were contradictory to it. And I am looking for things that are contradictory to it. And I would, like I think I told you this before, I suggest that you don't believe this model either. That you just accept it as something that seems to work, something that fits the data, something that makes sense of not only the scientific facts, but of your own experiential facts, your own explorations into mind and consciousness, into being, and that it makes sense to your life. So that's kind of the thing. The model is a living, growing thing. It's not to be believed, it's to be tested. So test it is what you really should do. Now, why should you care? Well, before we get to why should you care, I'll answer the question of where is it going? You know, what's it doing, and how does it fit into the bigger picture of thoughts and ideas? Well, I mentioned earlier that science now has moved a giant step in the direction of accepting this model. Now, most scientists have never heard of this model because they don't come to things like this because this is that kind of woo-woo crazy stuff that they would never come to. So it's still not on their radar, but nonetheless, they've been moving dramatically toward a virtual reality. But they have not yet come to the conclusion that consciousness is the computer. That's a very hard step for them to take, because that kind of flies in the face of all the things that they've held dear for the last 200 years, and that's difficult. So where they are now is saying, yes, it's a virtual reality, we agree, and yes, I see that a virtual reality can't just compute itself. It doesn't just suddenly appear and start computing. That's just mystical. And then they change the subject because they just don't know what to say next. They're just up against the wall. They have no other concept to put there. So they're painting themselves into a corner once they understand that it's a virtual reality and no way to explain where that came from. Now, Dr. Fredkin, who I mentioned before, he said it came from other. In other words, we don't know, but it didn't come from here. That's too big a step for most of the physicists to take. They will have to, though. It's the only logical step. A simulation does not create itself. So, here's where I think it is going. Scientists in our culture are the new high priests. It's the scientists that tell us what to believe. 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, it was the priests that told us what to believe. They told us about the nature of reality and what was real and what was not. Well, there was a big struggle in the kind of the Reformation that occurred in the 17th and 1800s, and the priests kind of lost that struggle, and the scientists won it, and now the scientists are the new high priests. When the scientists tell the world that this is a virtual reality and get to the point that they say, and it came from other, that's going to open a can of worms. That's why they're having a hard time saying that, because they know it's going to open a big can of worms. And lots of people like yourselves will say, other? What's this other? Came from what? And we will have various groups, various religions will be saying, oh, I know what the other is. That's Yahweh. No, it's Jesus. No, it's Buddha. No, we'll have all of this going on. People will try to take credit for being other. And of course, they'll fight with each other. That won't be very nice. But there'll be a lot of turmoil, a lot of social turmoil, because we're pulling the rug right out from under the belief system of probably 60% of the world's population. What do you mean it comes from other? What do you mean this is not a solid physical reality? It's some virtual reality that comes from other. That will upset a whole lot of people when they get that. So it's a very hard thing to say. So the first step is that the scientists will have to come to the conclusion that it's other. They'll have to say that. They'll have to agree with Dr. Fredkin that it can't be, it is virtual and it can't be computed here. It's not part of this universe. The next step is going to be to realize that consciousness is the computer. So these are two major paradigm shifts that have yet to happen. The first paradigm shift, there were really three in a row. The first one was, yes, it's a virtual reality. All right, that paradigm shift has actually happened, or is in the process of happening now among the high priests of science. That's taking place. The next paradigm shift is, it's created in other, hasn't happened yet. And then the following paradigm shift is, consciousness is the computer. Consciousness is where it's happened. That then will pull together everything. Then the metaphysics and the physics, the consciousness, the theology will all kind of come together. Oh, look at this. It all fits in this big picture. Okay. Now, that is going to be a very, very big deal. Can you imagine? There was a lot of dislocation, a lot of fighting, a lot of violence around most of our previous big paradigm shifts. The flat earth. There were any number of people who were incarcerated, burned at the stake, or otherwise given a very hard time by the high priests in those days when they said the earth was round. There was another bunch before that were castigated and burnt and imprisoned that said that the earth was not the center of the universe, that the sun was the center of, well, I shouldn't say universe, center of the solar system, that the earth was just a planet among others circling around the sun. That was they were heretics for saying that. That was against the church, and they were persecuted. So we've seen every time we do a big change in the nature of reality, we see a lot of turmoil happening. Okay. And we're going to see a lot of turmoil here. Another big shift was when Newtonian science came into effect. When we had Newtonian science, before we had a more holistic view of the world. After Newton, the reality was a clock. It was a big clockwork. Everything, it was all mechanistic. You see, the whole reality, everything had a cause, and every cause had a previous cause, and so on. And it was just this big machine. Life, biology, planets, the solar system, everything was just this big machine that was cranking along. And that was a big idea. It wasn't as violent because the high priest had already kind of shifted from the theological priest to the scientific priest at that time. It was in the process of shifting, but that was a very big deal. Then there was another big shift in science anyway, when this double slit experiment was done. And suddenly scientists realized that this objective reality isn't really objective. It's statistical, probabilistic underlay under it. But then they promptly stuck their head in the sand and says, yeah, but we'll just ignore that. We'll pretend that doesn't exist. That's just that weird science. We'll just shut up and calculate. So that's kind of where we are today, you see. But this virtual reality, which is now coming in favor among scientists, turns the next paradigm, which is it comes from other, is going to start another seismic wave in how we see ourselves in the world. And then that this other is consciousness is the unifying thing that will pull it all together. But there will be a lot of turmoil. There will be a lot of people elbowing each other, trying to take control of this change, trying to manipulate this change, trying to say, my God's better than your God, this sort of thing. There's going to be a lot of that childish kind of power plays going on for who this other is and how does it work. And we're hoping I'm hoping anyway, that transition won't take so long and won't be so violent before they get to the next paradigm, which is consciousness is the computer, which then includes everybody. It's it's inclusive of all the players, all the religions, you know, all the atheists, everybody can play in that game. So in any way, I think that's probably where we're going. Now, I often get a question is, don't you think that now is kind of a very special time, a very pregnant time, a time when we are turning more toward spirituality? We're taking the spiritual component more serious than maybe just the religious component. It's more the spiritual component. And aren't we moving toward something big happening soon? And a lot of people thought that it was the 2012, some big thing would happen that was spiritually connected and so on. And the answer to that is yes, we are in a very special time. This is a very important time. And the reason is that through all of our history, we have had bubbles of low entropy, you know, turn up. And they're generally created by individuals of low entropy, you know, people who had bigger pictures. And we can see it in politics in the sense that we had, you know, in what, 500 BC was the kind of golden age of Greece. And we had people there who said, it's not about you know, what shall I say? It's not about a dictator telling everybody else what to do. It's not a king. You know, it's not an emperor. That let's have a republic. Let's all of us work together and cooperate. And you had the Greek Republic, and they defined the concept of citizen, somebody who belonged to the republic, who had rights. And all of this was a whole new concept. Well, that wasn't some greedy person just wanting power and thinking about themselves. That was somebody who had bigger ideas. And that grew, and that eventually got overcome by, you know, the rest of us who weren't really ready to support that, and it turned into fighting with each other and turned into disaster, and it disappeared. It self-destructed, which is what negative things do. But it arose again in Rome, right? You had the Roman Republic. And again, you had voting, and you had senators, you had elections, you had citizens. But that degenerated in time because the way the people were, the people kind of get what they are. And pretty soon that republic turned into an empire with emperors, and it got very mean-spirited, and it was more about power and what could you know, everybody has to do what you tell them, that kind of thing. It didn't treat people very nicely, so it self-destructed. So you see, we've had these bubbles of great leaders. You know, in theology, of course, you've had, you know, bubbles of very learned, very low entropy individuals who show up at times. You know, you had the Buddha, you had Jesus, you had Muhammad, you had these various people that come up, and suddenly it's not just about power and greed anymore. There's a spiritual component involved in it. But kind of us, we average people, eventually dominate, and the fear and the greed and the power hungry comes back and it goes away. We've been doing that now from as far as we have history. These bubbles have been coming. We're going back 4,000 or 5,000 years to where we have, you know, Taoism in China and Krishna in India, you know, that started Hindus. And again, good ideas that were spiritual in their things, but then eventually they become dogmatic and they become ritualistic. And, you know, now it's more about fear. You know, if you don't do this and if you don't believe that, you know, you're going to hell, or this happens and you need to give us 10% of your money, and it becomes a whole different kind of thing than when it started. So this has been going on, and what's different now? Well, the reason these things kind of bubbled up and then disintegrated was because they were all individual little things. There's a bubble here and a bubble there and a bubble someplace else. At any one time, there's probably thousands of people who are very low entropy, you know, walking around in our midst, but they're not connected. You know, there's no organization. There's not a thing going, because that's not the way spirituality is. It's very individual. You don't go out and start an organization. That's not the point. It's being loved, you see. So it never really got together. Today we have cell phones and the internet. Now it's a world community. We're not that fragmented. Ideas go around the planet in seconds, you see. Things that we do here will be viewed on YouTube by people all over the world. See, it's a different ball game now. So these little bubbles of spirituality, these little bubbles of love can kind of affect big areas now instead of just a little area. Okay, here's the area around Galilee, and that got affected, you know, for a while, and here's the area, you know, in Rome, and that got affected, but it all kind of goes up and then kind of peters out into ritual and other things. So this is a very special time. Now we have this internet that we can connect with people all over. These things can spread worldwide rather than just in local areas. And okay, other things spread, you know, Christianity spread, Buddhism spread, but it's spread over millennia. I'm talking about spreading over years, you know, in a decade. It's a big difference. And when we get there, I'm hoping that enough people will have the bigger picture of consciousness as the computer, that instead of wanting to fight each other for who's dominant and who can claim other for their own, we can say, hey, look, there's a bigger picture. We can all play. We can all understand, you know, that it's about love. You know, consciousness is the computer. You can't, one group claiming ownership of other and they're superior to everybody else is just the old paradigm working itself again. So that's the solution. And that's why you're here. That's why I'm here. And we're you know, trying to spread this idea around to people who care and want to know and have this sense of something's going on here, something's happening, you know. The spirituality movement is gaining ground. Why? Because for the first time in the history of the planet, conditions are ripe that we can actually maybe do this thing to where these ideas of love is the answer aren't just a group of 70 people sitting in a room in Mexico City, but they spread worldwide. You have to start someplace. So anyway, that's my viewpoint of where this might fit in or affect our reality and our humanity. You know, that's kind of, what's the big picture here? What might this do? Now, it's not just me and this, obviously. I'm just one of thousands of people who are saying similar kinds of things. There's all kinds of people now that are saying very similar things. If you've read Eckhart Tolle, you know, he will agree with almost everything I've said. If you read Conversations with God, you know, they'll agree with almost everything I've said. You know, you can find this all over the place. You know, I'm just another one. What I bring to it is the glue to bring it all together as one, you know, thing, and I bring in the high priests, because without the high priests joining, without the scientists joining and saying, yea, verily, you know, reality's like this, and other is where it comes from, and conscious and computer, if the high priests don't say that, well, then it's not right. It's not a fact, you see, because they're the ones that tell us what to believe. So it's important. This can't happen until the scientists become a part of it. As long as they're not a part of it, there's going to be this, you know, this polarity. Those for, those against, those who think the other ones are stupid, you know, and these are, you know, not. And we're going to have that kind of struggle going on. So it's important that science becomes a part of it. So we need to make the left brain people who only want logical process, and the right brain people who really don't need logical process, they get there intuitively. They all have to come together. Otherwise, it's still going to be just a fight, a struggle. And that's the part that I'm bringing to it, is that connect the whole thing and how it all fits together as one picture, which is the solution to the let's fight and see who's dominant. So that's kind of the way I see. I'm just one player in a whatever, but I bring my part to it, which hopefully will add at the time it needs to be added, which our first opportunity as a race is now. So, you know, you can kind of see you're part of something big here. You know, it's not just something that you want to, oh yeah, that was interesting, let's forget about it and, you know, go on and do something else next week. There's really something important going on here that we should be aware of and kind of understand how we fit in it. So that's, I thought you might find that interesting. So why should you really care about this? Well, that's one reason. You know, it's important in a much bigger picture than just you as an individual. On the other hand, why should you care about it as an individual? Why is it important to you? Well, there's a bunch of reasons, and it's not obvious, but I hit on it a little bit yesterday. It's not really obvious, but because this reality has been designed for consciousness to evolve, and because the system, the larger consciousness system, tries to help us succeed, you're in a game where there's a definite purpose and a definite way to progress through this game, and a definite way to win. You know, I say there's a way to win the game, win being a metaphor. Okay? The game is constructed so that if you move in the right direction, if you increase the quality of your consciousness, you know, you progress, you pass go, get $200, you know, you're winning the game. And if you don't, if you're dragging your feet and you're not part of that process, then you get reminded that you're not growing. And the way that works is that if you are growing up, things work wonderful for you. Your life is terrific. If your relationships are about love, not about a deal you make about trading needs, then your relationship becomes wonderful. You see, perfect. You don't struggle in that relationship because the two of you are trying to give to each other. It's not about what you get. And you don't get unhappy because you didn't get what you wanted. You see? So your life gets so much better. Most of the things that we struggle with, most of those things that create ulcers, most of those things that upset us and keep us on edge, make us cry, you know, and get us upset, most of the pain in our life is all self-inflicted. We create that because we approach life with fear. We approach it with ego. And that's why life is hard. That's why it's challenging. That's why it's painful. And if you approach it with love and you approach it with cooperation and caring about others and not about yourself, okay, nobody's saying, yeah, but what about me? Nobody's elbowing to get their fair share. What happens? You get more than your fair share. You don't have to elbow to get it. If you approach life with love, everything will work for you. So all the pain that you deal with on a day-to-day basis, all the disappointment, all the, if things could only change, if only, you know, that person would see it my way, if only the boss would give me a raise, if only my wife or my husband would stop, you know, doing this or do that, or if they do this, or, you know, if only it was just the way I want it. You see, with that approach, it'll never be the way you want it. Never. It's going to be turmoil and unhappiness and frustration forever. When it's, I accept it the way it is. I give to it. I try to help. I give. How can you make somebody else be different? You can't change anybody else. The only person you can change is yourself. Nobody else. So why not change the one thing that you can change? Because if you don't change anything, don't expect anything to be different. You know, if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to keep getting the same result. So yourself is all you can change. Now the way you can help another person change, not change them, but help them change themselves, is to give them an environment in which it's easier for them to change themselves. Well, what kind of environment is that you can give another person that makes it easier for them to change themselves, which means easier for them to get rid of their fear? What you can give them is security. What you can give them is peace. If you give them that security where they can take the risk of being vulnerable, of opening up, of changing themselves, Well, that's the most you can do. Now, if you do that and they choose not to change themselves, they just, instead, they say, oh, I'm glad you're so giving now, I'll abuse that, you know, I'm going to take advantage of you. Well, then, you need to move on to greener pastures. You see? Everybody has a potential to love, but we all have different capacities for love. If we have a whole lot of fear, our capacity to love is less. If we get rid of that fear and ego, our capacity to love is greater. So you can only fix yourself. Increase your own capacity to love, give that love away, and accept what happens. Remember we talked in the beginning, why, the little formula for what happens here? Stuff happens, we get to deal with it, and how we deal with it determines whether we evolve or de-evolve, whether we grow up, whether we grow spiritually or not. So that's kind of the bigger picture of what's going on. Why should you care? Why should you actually take this seriously? Because it will totally change your life. It'll make you a different person. It will completely change your relationships. But you don't change your relationships by changing other people. They have to change themselves. You can't change them. You can only give them the security and the love and the support that enables them to change themselves more easily. Whether they do or not depends on them and their capacity to grow. People will grow only when they're ready. You guys are all here because you were ready. You wanted to hear this. You found this interesting. You're ready. You're seeking something. You wanted to hear somebody talk about, you know, maybe a different way of viewing life. Because you're seekers and you're ready, that's why you're here. Why aren't other people here? Well, maybe they just didn't know about it, but maybe they just weren't ready. So nobody will change until the time that they're ready to make that change. If their environment frightens them, they'll be less likely to change. So that's why it should be important to you. It will change everything in your life. All right, the next thing, let's see, we're just going to keep on going because until we get to 12. The next thing we'll talk about is how can you do that? Okay, how can you begin this process of changing yourself? What are the steps required? Well, the first step is to be honest. Okay, you need to know who you are at an authentic level. And most of us are not all that honest about ourselves. Most of us like to deny the things about ourselves that we maybe don't find too good, and we make excuses for them and so on. So first you just have to get to know yourself. Who are you? And one of the ways you can do that, surprisingly enough, one of the ways that will help you do that is meditation. When you're in that point state of consciousness, you just are awareness. Everything else has kind of been dropped off and you are just awareness. And if you get into that state and just start to feel, to think, to intend, kind of put the question out there, who am I? What am I? You know, things will come to you. And these things that come to you are not pretty. You need to not run from them or justify them or feel guilty about them. You need to just embrace them and accept them and say, you know, really, who am I? What am I? What do I need to learn? What are my lessons here? And if you do that in this meditation state, you'll get those answers. It'll start to open up you. You might not like what you hear. Open and skeptical. You can be skeptical of it. You should. I don't want you to believe. You know, you open up your mind and you get some kind of feedback back. Be skeptical of it, but be open to it. So that's one way you can do it. The second way we talked about is that you look at your pain. Look at your anxiety. Look at things that you just don't like. Those things in your life that annoy you, aggravate you, don't feel right, don't feel good. You think, okay, I'll live with it, but it's not really what I want. Those kinds of things. Look at those and find the fear behind them. there's a good chance there will be a fear behind that pain, behind that anxiety. Find that fear and don't be afraid of it. Embrace that fear, accept that fear, and say, okay, I've got a fear that if I don't continue to carry on this image, terrible things will happen. People won't like me, I'll lose my job, whatever. Well, say, all right, if that happens, but at least I'll be authentic. And that's a start. So that's courage. Just do it and accept the worst. Because once you accept the worst, the fear no longer has teeth. Accepting the worst of your fear pulls the teeth of it. Because if you accept that that'll happen, then what is there to be afraid of? You've already accepted the worst, you might as well just go on. And what you will find almost always is that worst never happens. Matter of fact, instead of the worst happening, it gets better. Everything actually gets better, not worse. Because these fears are just in your head. They're not here. Because what's here is because of what's in your head, you see? When you let go of that, you stop manifesting that reality, and your reality gets better. So have the courage to accept the worst and just do it. Find an authentic self, live that way, live in the moment. Don't focus all your energy on manipulating what's up front, what happens. Spend your time making good, love-based choices. Don't worry about yourself so much. Don't put yourself at the center of your universe. If you do that, it'll be a scary thing to do. Very scary. Not an easy thing to do. But you will find that your whole life gets better. Everybody in your life gets nicer, gets more accommodating. See? And it's not really so much that they've changed, but your perception of them has changed. Instead of seeing them as people that aren't giving you what you want, you have a totally different perspective anymore. They're people just trying to grow up like you are. See, we're all doing the best we can with what we've got. But what we've got is mostly a lot of fear. But we're struggling with it. Now we just need to face it and let it go. Okay, so that's how you do that. Another technique is to be aware of all of your choices, particularly when that choice is made with, kind of anxiety. It doesn't feel good. It's not really what you'd like to do. You need to be aware of that choice. We make choices all the time. We're not even aware we're making choices. And most of those choices get made not even by our intellect. And I've had any number of people who, after I've given them the same kind of information, I'll get an email back later, and it's like they said, I didn't think I had any fear. Particularly young men. I don't have any fear. I mean, fear. I don't make any decisions out of fear. I don't have any fear, and I don't have any beliefs either. I'm free. I'm just my own person. And then, 3 months later, I'll get an email from them, and they'll say, "Oh my God, I didn't realize I have so many fears. I don't know where to start, and everything I do is based on my beliefs and my fears." And it hits them like a hammer because they didn't have any idea that's the way they were. In their mind, this didn't apply to me. But when they actually tried and spent some time to find those fears, they found they were everywhere. Just little things, they were everywhere. And I think that is most people's idea. But as soon as they get that, they start working on getting rid of them. They start saying, well, next time that happens to me, I'm not going to react that way. All right, that's the intellect. But eventually the intellect turns into the being level, and they just don't act that way. And then I hear from them another 3 months later, and they say their life is totally different. They're not the same person. Their relationship is great. Everything's working for them. They're doing better in their job. It's just life has gotten better. So I hear this over and over. I've had thousands of people do this and tell me these things, and I know this is what happens. But you're thinking, fear? What fear? And maybe I don't want to go there and get in that fear. That's sticky. Maybe I just ought to ignore it. Everything's not so bad. The pain isn't that bad that I can't just keep on keeping on. But that's not a good decision. You really have to take a proactive decision. Say, I'm going to spend some time and effort and try to find out, what are my fears? What are my beliefs? How do my beliefs limit me? How do my fears kind of rule my choices? Discover that. It is hard work. You do have to focus. You can't do it like tomorrow. You have to do it over the next 3 months, and you have to stay focused on it. But if you do, you'll find it'll make a huge difference. So that's how you do this. There's no other way other than courage, other than facing it, becoming authentic, finding out who you are, accepting that, and then growing from there. Let all the beliefs go. Some of these beliefs, most of these beliefs, you picked up when you were 2 and 3 years old. Some of them you just kind of assimilated out of your culture. Like the belief that you can't get from here to there unless you move. See, that's just a belief. That's why you have to have the tunnel. You know, the belief that any information that you get has to have a head, 2 arms, and legs to go along with it. See, it's just a belief. We've got all these beliefs. I mean, we've got scads of them that we don't even know we have. And it affects how we interpret everything. If somebody comes up and says something to you, you may interpret that that was really a mean thing, that you didn't like that. How inconsiderate of them. But that may not be inconsiderate of them at all. They may not have any of that negative intent toward it, but you interpret it that way. You see? So now your life is unhappy. It doesn't have to be. So you create that reality in how you see things. How you see things is based on what you are. If what you are is fear and belief, well, you create a mess, and then you live in a mess. And a lot of people live in a soap opera all the time, wringing of the hands, gnashing of the teeth, in their families, right? In their families, and they're always arguing, and this person's trying to make that person do this, and they're resisting, and that person's trying to impose their ideas this way, and it's just a constant soap opera of everybody trying to manipulate everybody else to be the way they think they ought to be. And they live their whole life that way. That's such a waste of potential, you see. Because not only do you have to realize that you're full of fear, but so is everybody else. And they're dealing out of their fear. So you can just let that go and say, well, that's just who they are. They're doing the best they can with what they have. They're not terrible people that I should be angry at. It's just the way they are. Now, how can I learn to work with that positively? One, I won't react to it negatively anymore, but how can I work with that positively? How can I help them with their fear, you see? It becomes about other, not just about yourself. So that's kind of the, how does it affect me, down at the personal level. So I just did the 2 levels. Up at the big level, what's going on in the world? What's going on with the whole concept of reality here among human beings on the planet? And this is the first chance ever to actually make the whole world unite in an idea of love is the answer. Wow, one world family. What a concept, right? Well, everybody knows it's a good concept, and everybody knows if we were all cooperative and treated each other with love and so on, it'd be a much better place to live, but it just can't ever happen because you get little bubbles of it, and then those bubbles get squished because they never get to connect. So we have the big picture and the little picture down to ourselves. And it's the whole idea. Now let's see, what else are we going to talk about? I just have 2 more things on my list, and I've got 15 minutes to go, so that'll probably work pretty well. So the bottom line is that evolving, moving forward, and growing is many times more rewarding than failing, endlessly repeating our mistakes, slowly sliding deeper into dysfunction. Right? If you live by making your choices out of fear, life becomes a soap opera, or like living in a grade B zombie movie. You just go through life because you do what you do because you do it. You don't really know why. You just function. You're like a robot, like a zombie going through life. So we'd like to get out of that mode. We did talk about free will a little bit, but I'd like to elaborate on it some. we all do have free will, and I told you about decision space, and that's your freedom to make a decision that's in your decision space, in your known decision space. Okay, well, one of the things that happens as you grow toward love, that decision space grows. As that decision space grows, your reality grows. So as you evolve the quality of your consciousness, as you accumulate more spiritual growth, the reality you live in gets bigger, much bigger. You live in a bigger world. Now there's connections and things going on and stuff that you see and understand and makes sense that were just mysterious before or didn't even exist. You see, so much better. So you live in a larger reality. That's a very good thing. That larger reality also gives you more choices, more ways to learn, more ways to grow. So you approach those choices, every choice you have is a challenge. Everything that comes to you, see it as a challenge, an opportunity for growing, an opportunity for making the right choice. Whatever it is that comes to you, whether it's a catastrophe, a disaster, something very sad, it comes to you, don't just wallow in self-pity. Say, what's the right decision here? How can I learn from this? How can I grow from this experience? Bad things are good teachers as well. It's a very unfortunate thing about us humans is that you can learn through, you can learn through pain. Pain is the kind of the stick that keeps prodding you. You have to change because otherwise your life's going to stay like this. If you don't, there's that pain that's always sticking you. But on the other hand, you could learn just from pleasure and good things too, if you had your mind open to it. But unfortunately, we humans, when we get in a good situation where everything's working, we don't want to change anything. We don't think that we still need to grow. Like, we're here, let the good times roll, everything's good. We kind of shut down and stop trying to grow. So the only thing that makes us move is a sharp stick. Keep getting stuck with the sharp stick. It's the pain, it's the misery that we create for ourselves that is our motivation to change. So that's a sad fact, but pain is how we learn. So when pain comes to you, don't think of it in terms of self-pity or, oh no, woe is me, that shouldn't have happened, and look at all the terrible things, and now how could I have manipulated that so that didn't happen? See, that's what we do. And how can I manipulate that to make it better? Think, what can I learn from this? Where's the lesson? Where's the right choice to interact here? Let's see a bigger picture instead of always looking in the little picture, because you are always at the center of your own little picture. Find a bigger picture where you're not in the center, and that will be a help. So we have this free will, but everybody else has free will too, and we need to respect it. So we don't want to run over anyone else's free will. They're on their path, doing what they're ready for, and if it's not the same thing you're ready for, well, you have to let them be. There's other people doing things that you're not ready for, and you don't want them jumping into your game or pressing you or telling you that you're inadequate because you're not ready and they are, You got to let people be and respect them for where they are and that they have free will. They have to make their own choices, and they need to evolve or de-evolve on their own and accept the consequences of that. Well, that's hard when it's your children, isn't it? See, that's hard when it's your spouse, but you still need to do that. Once you're an adult, now children, you can't say, well, children, you have your own free will. You can play in the street if you want to or not, and they're only 3 years old. Well, no. Then you're the dictator. You say, no, you're staying in the yard, and if they don't, you put a gate up and you put a lock on the gate, right? There are times that you have to do that, but not with other adults. And with your children, as they become adults and go through that teenage years, you have to let that go. Progressively let that go and give them more and more freedom to make bad decisions as well as good decisions. That's hard to do, but you can't dominate them or you'll hurt them. That's not good for them. See? So you just love them, give them the environment in which they can most likely make better decisions. Give them the guidance, and then accept what happens and help yourself and them grow from whatever happens. Make it a learning experience. Don't make it a tragedy. See? So you turn tragedies into learning experiences. That helps a lot. Okay, so that's one more thing I'd like to say is that when you think about this thing of evolution, don't get into evolution as a hierarchy. Oh, you know, I've been meditating for 10 years and, you know, and I've been healing for 5 and, you know, I'm just a whole lot more evolved than most everybody else. That sort of thing is not helpful. Don't see it as there's stratas of evolution and these people are more evolved than those people. Don't put it in a hierarchy like that, that's dysfunctional. You need to see it as everybody is in the same boat. Everybody's not at the same level in their evolution, but we're all in the same boat. And that boat is do the best you can with what you've got. Learn from what you're ready to learn. Capitalize on that. Okay, now some people aren't even trying to capitalize. They aren't trying to grow up. No, they're not ready for it yet. If you can give them an environment that encourages their growing up, good. If you can't, it's the way it is. Accept it. Don't call them bad people. Don't feel superior to them. It's just the way it is. They are where they are. So that's another thing. We don't want this hierarchy of, who's more evolved than who. I'm an old soul and you're just a young soul, so I know a whole lot more than you. So you need to listen to what I say. You see, that's not functional. That's why I tell you, don't believe what I say. You need to find out. You need to have enough interest to go do it. Convince yourself. Try these things. See what it does to your life. That becomes then your truth. All I can do is fill up your intellect with ideas, maybe things you hadn't thought of, ways of seeing things that you hadn't thought of looking at them that way before. So I'm trying to provide an environment for you in which your own growth is easier for you to do. But I can't make anybody grow or change in any even small way. But I can provide some information that maybe will encourage you to grow on your own. That's kind of the point. And Heisenberg, you'll find them saying things, they sound like me. They're saying things like, these experiments show that consciousness is an integral part of the physical reality, and that sort of thing sounds very mystical. They said those things 80 years ago, and then it all got ignored because nobody knew what to do with that information, how to go forward with it, and they didn't want to undermine their own scientific method with things that they really couldn't understand. So science is kind of up against the wall. This is being forced on them by their own experiments. They're not looking for it. They're not searching for it. They're not welcoming it. They don't know what to do with it, and they're being pushed into this realization. They're not reaching out for it. It's just they've been pushed enough that a sizable majority, or a sizable minority at least of them, now admits that this is the way it is, but they really don't know why. And they're not willing to go to even other. I think it was 5 physicists from all over the world, top physicists. The 2 that were from the US, I think one was MIT, the other was maybe Caltech. All the best, they were discussing virtual reality, and Dr. Fredkin was there among them because he said that 20 years ago. So he was there, and Dr. Fredkin pointed out to them again, they were talking about virtual reality, and they all thought it is a virtual reality. Information is the base of our reality. So there wasn't any question about that. It wasn't an argument at all. They all agreed on that. And when Dr. Fredkin said, well, you'll have to admit that a reality cannot simulate itself. You don't start with nothing and then suddenly it starts to simulate itself and creates a reality, right? That just doesn't make any sense. That's, You know, any third grader will tell you that's not logical, that a simulation creates itself. How can it create itself if it hasn't been created yet to create itself? You see, it's a illogical thing. And don't you know that Fredkin was the only one, after he said that, not a single one of those other physicists would agree with him. Yet this is elementary logic. They all said, yeah, it seems like that, but no, I don't think it has to necessarily be that way, but, and when he said, well, but what? And they said, but, well, we just don't know. We just don't like that answer. See? So that's kind of what we're up against. They just don't like that answer, but they don't have any other answer. And it's a struggle. It's going to take, it's hard for people to change things they've believed in for, you know, forever. Cultural beliefs are really hard to change. So it's not, that's why you're not going to find it in textbooks. No, it's not there yet. We're not there yet. We're just beginning to take that first paradigm step. We got more paradigm steps afterwards. Now, is this an intellectual thing? Do you have to have a certain amount of cognitive ability to do this? There's a yes and no to that. To do what I'm telling you, you know, to read my books, My Big Toe, to look at my videos and get a lot out of them, yes, you have to have some cognitive ability to do that. It's a bit of a struggle for a lot of people because these paradigm shifts are big changes in our reality and the way we look at things. That takes some thinking to get that. But is this the only way to get there? Absolutely not. We've had for a long time a division between the right-brainers and the left-brainers. Okay? The right-brainers are intuitive. They don't need a lot of logical process. They understand. They see bigger pictures without having a lot of logical process to get them to that bigger picture. They just get there intuitively. Their experience. They accept their experience. When they experience something that's not explainable, they don't say, oh, well, I must have been mistaken because that's not explainable. They believe in themselves and their experience, and they just go with it without an explanation. They don't need an explanation. Oh, did we lose it? Still have it? Are we? I need to get a thumbs up from the translators to see if they're still getting this. Are we still getting it? Okay. So that still exists, and that's still a very valid path. But now, what about these left-brain people? These left-brain people are the people that require logical process. If there's not a logical step through it, then they're just not going there. Right? Who are these people? Well, these are the scientists, the doctors, the lawyers, the businessmen, the people who make their way in the world by logical process. They think, they have logical process. They're all the professionals, right? Logical process is how they get there. The right brain people, what do we call them? You know, airheads, space cadets, the woo-woo people, right? We degrade them. We don't give them the proper respect that they're due because they're getting, in the most part, correct answers. It's just we don't give them credit because they couldn't possibly be correct because there's no logical process getting there. And they really don't care about the logical process. So I wrote my books for the left-brainers. I don't need to write books for the right-brainers. They already get it. No, they can't explain it to you because they don't get it in a logical way. But they get it just the same, and that's a perfectly valid way to get there. So you don't need logical process to get to this point. To find out that love is the answer doesn't require a lot of thinking. All you have to do is be honest, be genuine, and it's obvious that people get along better, right? If you care about them, if they care about each other. I mean, that doesn't take a college degree to figure that out. That's just intuitive. But the logical process people, and who are these logical process people? They're all the people in charge. They're the people that make decisions. They're the people that make the laws and the rules all the rest of us have to follow, right? That's the logical process. They're the decision makers. They're basically in charge. Well, we need a way to get to those people. We need a way to show them that love is the answer, and that being kind and nice to each other is actually a good scientific idea with logical process behind it, not just some wishful thinking that nobody's proven that that really helps do anything. You know, it's a nice idea, but where's the proof? So I purposely wrote my book to give a path to the left-brainers who are kind of in charge of our world, making the decisions, so they could see that consciousness, love, caring, evolution, all of this stuff, they can get to it now. They've got a path that they can get to. Now see, there's hundreds of books written. Eastern philosophy, you know, says a lot of the same things I say. Like I say, you know, Eckhart Tolle. I mean, there's lots of stuff out there. And the right brain people get it already. The left brain people ignore it. They don't read it. So I had to give them a path. So yes, my books are like that. They do take cognitive ability to get through my process, but that's the value of them, not the problem of them. The other people who really don't want to go through that cognitive process, they already have an abundance of things to talk to them. People who need that logical process have nothing to talk to them. They pick up a book on philosophy, they read the first 3 pages, they put it down and say, this is a bunch of nonsense. There's no proof in here. There's no logical process, you know. Somebody's just making this stuff up. And that's it. They're not going there. They have this belief, you see, that if you can't get there through a logical process, it isn't important and it doesn't exist. That's a belief. That's one of those limiting beliefs. Because they believe that, they're not open-minded. They're closed-minded. They're skeptical without being open-minded. So I wrote this on purpose, and I say that in my introduction somewhere, that this is a book for those left, you know, for the left brain people. It gives them a path to get to this understanding. Otherwise, they'll never get here. And I did that because I know that the scientists, as the high priest of our culture's never going to change. I wouldn't say never. It's going to have to struggle and take a very long time to change if we can't bring the scientists with us. They have to be part of the group. They have to come along. We can't exclude them because then it'll just be a, you know, a food fight between the 2 poles, and that won't take us anywhere. So that's why it's not necessary. You can be a right-brain person, and you can look at my books and say, I can't read that. You know, and a lot of people tell me that, and these are very wise people that tell me that. People who have a lot of understanding. They can't read my book because they just don't do logical process. They've never found logical process necessary, and it doesn't matter. So in my thoughts and the way I go in this logical process is not the only path. It's just one path for a special
set of people. But I've found hundreds of people who are technical people, you know, physicists and lawyers and people doing computer work and all that, and they get really excited about it because they have their wives or girlfriends trying to feed them this stuff all the time. And it's, rubbish, you know, doesn't need anything. Where's the proof? And then they read mine and go, oh, I get it now. See, they couldn't get it any other way. So then, now they can talk to their wives and girlfriends about it, and it's okay. That's not just guys. It's ladies too. There's an awful lot of women who have logical processes. It's our culture. We live in a culture that values logical process and devalues intuitive process. That's unfortunate what we do.